We have reached the part of the podcast where we're going to be talking about fantasy football. Obviously, this is an off week in the NFL. With it being an off week, Nick and I decided we're going to look at players we're going to look to target next year and players we're going to look to fade, plus also which player being drafted in this year's draft class that we're excited about and going to look to draft. But without that, let me welcome Nick to the show. Nick, how you doing today, my man?
Great. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing good, my friend. Now, let's look at this. Obviously, I like to do this exercise right immediately after the season just because everything's fresh in our mind.
Right.
How we're going to do this, we're each going to tell some people that we're going to fade and look to target. Obviously, we'll start with the fades first. Who's the first player that you're looking to fade?
So, especially a person I'd like to fade in the probably it's going to get drafted in the first round next year is Tyreek Hill. Few reasons why. I mean, I feel like he really hit his ceiling this year. He had 119 catches, over 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns. I feel like there's going to be some concerns in Miami on their offense with quarterbacks and who's throwing him the ball next year. And I don't think he can top that line again. The last time that his highest numbers were 1,479 yards. He obviously overdid that this time, but that was 1,479 yards was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 seasons ago. So the next season he regressed, and I think that's going to happen again. I don't think he can top those numbers.
I think the $1 million thing going on in Miami is we don't know what's going on with the quarterback.
Right.
Exactly. And you have to think of it like this. Tua couldn't even participate in the flag football game because of his concussion.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah.
So obviously that's a big elephant in the room. We don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Makes a ton of sense. Tyreek Hill looking to fade next year. My first fade is, and this is going to shock a lot of people because I'm sure people are thinking, oh, Kellen Moore is coming to Los Angeles Chargers. Let me go get Austin Ekeler with the success Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott have. I'm looking to fade Austin Ekeler just because I think he's at his ceiling right now. And by drafting him so high next year, we're drafting this year's player. So we're a year behind. We want to be a year ahead of the curve. And that's why I'm going to be fading Ekeler because he scored 370 points. I think he's due for some regression. And one thing the Kellen Moore offense has showed us, a lot of dual threat. I think it's going to go down where it's going to be like a 45% share, have that be with the kid Spiller they drafted or Joshua Kelly. I'm not sure who's that other back's going to eventually be, but I think it's going to be more of a split backfield. I don't think we're going to get anywhere near that production we've gotten this year. I think Ekeler is going to take a big step back. Because of that, I'm fading Austin Ekeler next year.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because Ekeler, it's kind of like the same scenario with Jonathan Taylor that we had this year. Everybody's like, he's a lock number one because of his season the year before. Well, that bit everybody, including me. So I totally agree with that Ekeler call.
Who is your next fade?
So, going along with the Miami offense and the concerns, my next fade is Tua. He's the concussion thing is a really big concern for me. I don't know if he does play next year. They're gonna have to be real cautious with him. If he gets hit again, I mean, I'm afraid for him. His career might be over. And also, if he is healthy next year, when we watched him play against top tier defenses, he looked like a high school quarterback. I'm sorry, but I just can't trust him to put up numbers, and I'm really afraid for his health. So I would totally fade Tua next year.
Yeah, he may be out of the league next year.
I know.
He'll have to retire.
Yeah, and this is the way too early picks for us, but I mean that's my initial feed on that.
My next one, I'm going to Jacksonville. I'm taking Travis Etienne. Look, he's not built to be an every down back. He's not a between the tackle runner. He's had 255 touches, and we saw this at Clemson. In Clemson, he had a year where he had close to this touches, and what happened his first year in Jacksonville, he got hurt and he missed it. With the way he's built body-wise, I can honestly see that happening next year. As much as I hate to say it, I never wish injury on anybody else, but I could see it. Obviously, we saw he got tired in the game against the Chiefs in the playoffs. Nowhere to be found in the fourth quarter just because the physical beating, he just got too tired and wasn't out on the field. And now let's look at the defenses this team's going to have to play: the Jacksonville Jaguars, Titans twice, top 5 run defense, Ravens, Bengals, also good against the run. 49ers, I know they're using Ryans, but when you have Armstead, Bosa, et cetera, Browns, shockingly, I think they're going to be better against the run because I think they're going to solve their defensive line issues. Saints were good against the run last year. Steelers with Watt were good against the run, and the Buffalo Bills. That's a real tough schedule for someone who's not built like an everyday, every down running back. So I'm looking to fade Travis Etienne next year.
I like it.
Who is your first fade, my friend?
Oh, my final fade is Kyle Pitts. I've never really been a fan of Kyle Pitts. I know you have, but I've never really been a fan. Quarterback question marks in Atlanta. We don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to draft a quarterback? Are they going to try to ride it out with Ritter, or are they going to make a trade? Not really sure who they're going to get there. And the injury concerns are starting to pile up for Pitts as well. And I just for all of the question marks that are there, I can't see drafting him over anybody else.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we don't know what we're going to get. Obviously, one of the reasons I'm looking to fade him, a little bit of a tease, is going to be in one of the players I'm looking to target. Totally agree with you on that. The first player I'm looking to fade, my top fade, Jamal Malik Williams of my Detroit Lions. We don't even know where he's going to be. He's a free agent. He may not even be back in Detroit next year. But when we just look at him, he finished the season with 17 touchdowns. That was the most in the NFL. Set a Lions record for touchdowns, more than Barry Sanders. He led the NFL in red zone touchdowns and carries. And hypothetically, if he does come back to Detroit with how good Detroit did, finishing second in the NFC, this means tougher games. If they are tougher games, Detroit could abandon the run. Maybe Swift can stay healthy. That leads to more touches for Swift. Take some away from Jamal Williams. Again, did he have a good season? Yes. But if you draft him high, 3rd round, 4th round, you're playing a premium on last year, and that's what Nick and I are trying to get you guys to avoid. I'm fading Jamal Williams next year.
Yeah, he hit a ceiling again. I mean, 17 rushing touchdowns. Come on.
Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Now let's shift over to guys that we are looking to target. Nick, who are you looking to target?
Well, on that note, I'm actually going back to the Detroit Lions, but I'm going at the wide receiver route, and I absolutely love Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 106 catches, 1,161 yards, and 6 touchdowns this year. I think he's going to outdo himself from this year, next year, do even better, and become like the focal point of that offense. And I think Jared Goff has gotten a really good rapport with him. Obviously, they traded off Hockenson this year, so you've got. I think they're going to target Amon-Ra St. Brown even more now. I could easily see him doing a 1,400 plus yard season next year.
Yeah, he's definitely became the number one. Shark looks like he's out. That's going to open up some targets. Jameson Williams field stretcher. I absolutely love Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's just one of those guys who just seems to produce week after week after week in the Lions offense. The first one that I'm going to look to target, and I know it seems weird, Amari Cooper finished as wide receiver 9. Doesn't that kind of strike you as a little bit under the radar?
Yeah, with the way the Browns were, yeah, I agree. That's on the radar for me.
If we kind of look at it, the last 4 games, that's when Watson played, he was only wide receiver 13, so he digressed. But Watson didn't play for so long. it took him 2 games to get going. If we just
Yeah.
look at the last 2 games, those last 2 games of the year, Cooper was wide receiver 4. So now you look back at how good Watson was in RPO, in play action at the Texans. Stefanski's going to get that to carry over now next year with the Browns, and leading on Cooper as your number one, as the number one target. I think he's in line for a huge season, and I think he's completely undervalued. This is a wide receiver 1 in leagues, and nobody is talking about it. He finished, and I know this player missed time. He finished with more fantasy points than Jamar Chase. You know what I mean?
Did.
Like,
I mean,
people, if you just say it out loud, oh, wow. So I think he's a little bit undervalued. Nick, who's the next guy you're looking to target?
I like J.K. Dobbins. Now, I know there's some question marks around him. The injury, he was coming back. They eased him back in last year. But if you look at the 8 games he played, he had a 5.7 yard average. And, he had 520 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think they're going to unleash him a little more and try to protect Lamar a little more next year if he stays. And they're going to get, they're gonna have Lamar rush a little less to try and protect him from injury again, because if he comes back, which I think he will, they're gonna want him to not be injured every year and be their franchise quarterback. So I think they're gonna lean a little more on their running backs. I think Dobbins is a great guy to get as a, like an RB2, not an RB1 guy, but an RB2 guy. I think he's a great fit for that, unless the Ravens try to go after another running back, which there's possibilities around that, but I don't know.
I absolutely love that. I mean, he looked like he was the alpha. He was saying after the game he wants the ball, and he looked fresh. I mean, he's missed a lot of football because of injuries. He looked fresh in that wild card game, and that got that extra burst of speed. I think getting him there, it's going to be interesting to see who they get the OC, but I absolutely love Dobbins. My next guy, and I kind of hinted at it before when you were talking about Kyle Pitts, Drake London. He finished 20th this year, believe it or not, in red zone targets. In the weeks that Ritter was the starter, he averaged 9 targets a game, 5.75 receptions, 83.25 yards, and a solid 13.6 fantasy points per game. When Ritter was the starter, he was wide receiver 18. That's a bona fide wide receiver 2 on most teams. People really don't understand that when you're a wide receiver 18, that's a number 2 wide receiver on your team. And this is a guy that's probably going to be going in the 6th or 7th round, just kind of an estimates right now. I absolutely love Drake London. And I think with Ritter maturing, this is going to be a great pickup.
Absolutely love that pick too. I was really keeping an eye on Drake London late in the season, and I like that rapport he had with Ritter. We'll see what happens. I like that one.
Now, who is your last person you're going to target?
So this is my gamble of the year, and it all depends on if he gets reinstated into the NFL, of course, but it's Calvin Ridley. I think that he gets, if he gets into Jacksonville, he gets in training camp and is able to play early on in the season. They have weapons on that team that can pass, and as you talked about with them playing a lot of top run defenses, there's going to be more opportunities for them to pass. And it's not going to be like in Atlanta where Ridley was the only guy after Jones went out, and he was always the guy getting all the attention. And maybe he didn't have as good of games, but now you've got a good core of wide receivers in Jacksonville. So I think Ridley has more potential to have bigger games because he's not just going to be that only guy that the defense is going to target. There's a lot of options on that offense.
The defense is going to be looking to take away Christian Kirk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And with Ridley coming back, that's going to open more stuff up. People are going to forget about him. You got Lawrence, who obviously has a more explosive arm than Matt Ryan did at his time there. He's going to be able to stretch the field a little bit more, bring a little bit more big play stuff. Also, You got Ingram right there, probably the focus, who's there. Marvin Jones is leaving. He can
Yep.
sneak in, take Marvin Jones. You got
Zay
Zay
Jones.
Jones
Yeah.
lurking around. So there's a lot of targets right there that already in the offense. I think Ridley coming in is kind of going to be that forgotten guy if he can play because of the gambling stuff. But yeah, I absolutely agree 100%. I love Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be a little bit under the radar. My top target, and if you listen to my preseason stuff, I was fading this guy, but I'm back in this year. Deontay Johnson led the Steelers in red zone targets and he was 24th in the league in red zone targets, and he had no TDs. He led the Steelers in targets and receiving yards, set a record for most scrimmage yards without a TD ever. He is due for absolute positive TD regression. And you just look, this guy's a wide receiver too. If he gets 4 TDs with the production he did last year, I absolutely love Deontay Johnson if he stays in Pittsburgh. Obviously, there's some rumors they could cut him, have Pickens
Yeah.
be the guy. But if he stays in Pitt, I absolutely love him. Deontay Johnson is my top target. There you have it. Nick and I will be back next week. We're going to be talking about the big game. We're going to be looking at the guys we're going to be targeting. Basically, since it is one game, what we're going to do, the format will be a little different. We're not going to give our lineup. We'll just kind of go position by position and tell you which guys we like, which guys we don't like. Nick, thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
Thank you. And you can find me on @NAA Fantasy on Twitter. Thanks, man.
Until next week, my friend.